We know that instead of bringing God's will to the entire earth, Adam and Eve succumb to the temptation of Satan and rebel against their divine king. They decide that life would be better if they live independently from God. This is why R.C. Sproul calls sin cosmic treason, rebellion against the king of the cosmos, and the results that follow are disastrous. They turn from God, and he turns from them. Humans are no longer God's people, they are rebels. They are no longer in God's place, they are driven out of the garden, driven out from the special presence of God on earth. They no longer live under God's rule, they live as they see fit, they live as sinners. And since they are no longer under God's rule, they are no longer experiencing God's blessing. Instead, they are under his judgment. He is a holy God, but he also loves. He is determined to restore his kingdom, to restore a people for himself, a people who will glorify him as a royal priesthood, to rescue them from sin and death and bring them into his kingdom. And so much of the rest of the Bible is this story of redemption, this story of God's unfolding plan and making a people for himself. And so while Genesis 3 ends on a gloomy note, judgment on humans who have been driven out of God's special place, it also gives a promise, and much of the rest of the Old Testament is about God's promise. The first hint of this long-term strategy was introduced immediately after Adam and Eve sinned in Genesis 3:15. There, God cursed the serpent who had instigated Adam and Eve's sin, saying these words, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." Genesis 3:15. In essence, God promised that even though Satan and these human beings who had followed him would continue to trouble Eve's seed, eventually her true descendants, redeemed humanity, would crush the head of the serpent, conquering the one who had led them into cosmic treason. This is why Paul assured the Roman Christians in Romans 16:20, "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." Romans 16:20. And this is why Peter assures the believers that they have been restored. "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." 1 Peter 2:9.